Hello, I'm Geetha Gurumurthy. We begin in The Hague, where judges at the International Court of Justice, that's the United Nations top court, have just ruled that Israel must immediately halt its military offensive and other actions in Rafah, citing the immediate risk to the Palestinian people. It also ruled that Hamas must immediately and unconditionally release its hostages. Let's listen to what the judge, who was speaking in the past half an hour, had to say.
The court records that in accordance with Article 75, paragraph 2 of its rules, when a request for the indication of provisional measures has been made, it has the power under its statute to indicate measures that are not in whole or in part other than those requested. In the present case, having considered the terms of the provisional measures requested by South Africa and the circumstances of the case, the court found that the measures to be indicated need not be identical to those requested. The court considered that, in conformity with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, Israel must immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah governorate which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. The court recalls that in its order of January 26, 2024, it ordered Israel inter alia to, I quote, take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of acts within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Genocide Convention, end of quote. In the present circumstances, the court is also of the view that, in order to preserve evidence related to allegations of acts falling within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Genocide Convention, Israel must take effective measures to ensure the unimpeded access to the Gaza Strip of any commission of inquiry, fact-finding mission, or other investigative body mandated by competent organs of the United Nations to investigate allegations of genocide.
The judge there, the ICJ. Just to give you some initial responses, David Mercer, spokesperson for the Israeli government, has said there is no power in the world that will push us to commit a public suicide, because that's what this is, to stop our war against Hamas. That's repeating a line that would, of course, a consistent line that we've heard from the Israeli government, who I think are meeting now. There was a call for Mr. Netanyahu to meet his top ministers. And Hamas, as reported by the Reuters news agency, has said that they welcome the ICJ plan to send the investigation committee into Gaza. They say they would promise any cooperation that they can give. And they have said that they welcome the decision on Rafah, saying it doesn't go far enough. It's urging an end for Israel's offensive on all of Gaza and looking at whether the Security Council will now look to try and implement this ruling. Well, let's get more now. Our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams is in Jerusalem, and he told us more about the immediate reaction there in Israel.
This was the measure that was anticipated, with some debate as to whether or not the court would finally take that additional step. No official reaction from the government so far. It's due to discuss this ruling later today. There is a reaction from the hardline finance minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has called it irrelevant, and he's dismissed the court as anti-Semitic. These are the sorts of remarks you would expect to hear from some of Mr. Netanyahu's more hardline colleagues. But when it comes to the order to halt the Rafah offensive, I think we can expect a big fat no from the government here. And I think they will probably complain that the court, in coming to its conclusions, only cited what the UN had told them about the situation in southern Gaza. The Israelis have been arguing for some time that they are taking steps, notwithstanding their military operation in Gaza, that they are taking steps to improve the provision of food and goods into the Gaza Strip. It's very noticeable, for example, that for the 3 weeks or so after after May the 7th, when the order to launch the offensive in Rafah began, only about 140 trucks of UN aid entered through the Keren Shalom crossing, the most important crossing point from Israel. But, and this was something the court did not refer to, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trucks of commercial foodstuffs have gone in through that very same route, allowed in by Israel, escorted by armed guards inside the Gaza Strip, and taken into the marketplace in Gaza. There is food to be had in places. A lot of Gazans can't afford it, but that was an element of Israel's response to the situation in Gaza that the court simply didn't allude to. They also obviously did not allude to Israel's military rationale for attacking Gaza, the complete dismantling of the last remaining battalions of Hamas, and the importance, Israel would say, of securing the border between Gaza and Egypt to prevent the smuggling of weapons, which could lead to a future conflict. Now, all of this was not referred to by the court. The court obviously feels that of in excess of 800,000 people, we think it's probably closer to 1 million by now, is evidence of the increased risk to life and well-being of a huge proportion of the Palestinian population of the Gaza Strip. And that was enough to persuade those judges who had not been persuaded so far to say enough is enough, this operation has to stop.
Paul Adams there speaking to us a bit earlier from Jerusalem. And just to let you know that since we spoke to Paul, David Mencer, who's a spokesperson for the Israeli government, did give some reaction to the news to the BBC. And he said there is no power in the world that will push us to commit a public suicide, because that's what this is, to stop our war against Hamas. We understand the Israeli government are meeting or going to be meeting soon to discuss this ruling. We've also had reports on Reuters of Hamas reaction. Hamas apparently calling on the UN Security Council to implement the ICJ Court of Justice decision, welcoming the ruling and welcoming the call for an investigation, an inquiry, saying that they would cooperate with that. Also, we've had a response from the Palestinian Authority saying they welcome the decision, as again reported by Reuters news agency, saying that it represents an international consensus to end the war on the Gaza Strip, according to a Palestinian presidential spokesperson. We will keep you across all the reaction. Of course, we're going to be looking to the US to see what the White House say, whether this has any impact on Biden's current position of ongoing support for Israel, though, of course, he has warned repeatedly the Israeli leadership not to go into Hamas territory in Rafah because of the risk to civilian life. We will keep you across those events.